This is Comcast Local Edition. I'm Jack Hansen. We are aboard the USS Hornet here in Alameda. It is a floating museum. This week they're celebrating the 35th anniversary of the recovery of the Apollo 11 astronauts. Clancy Hatleberg is with us right now. He had a very important role. When those astronauts landed in the ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, somebody had to get them out of there and somebody had to be part of the rescue team. Clancy was part of that team. You were a frogman, basically, right?
Yeah, that's right, Jack. I had been in the Navy about 4 years. I was assigned to Underwater Demolition Team 11. I just come back from Vietnam and got the assignment of a lifetime.
Right. From Vietnam to here.
Exactly.
Underwater demolition, not exactly the easiest or safest job in the world, I imagine.
Well, it was an enjoyable adventure. I spent 20 years in special warfare, and the underwater demolition teams became the SEAL teams, and it was a grand and glorious experience, and I'm grateful for it.
So they got you there because of your experience to do what was the most important job probably in the history of man, bringing someone back from the moon.
Well, I'm not sure about my job being that important, but there are a lot of very important jobs. Yeah. Well, Underwater Demolition Team had a long history with NASA. They were doing the recoveries for the Mercury program, the Gemini program, and the Apollo program up to that point in time. And they rotated the assignments amongst the various underwater demolition teams, 2 on the East Coast, 2 on the West Coast. And it was time for UDT 11 to take up the responsibilities, and I was a senior officer assigned, and so they asked me to head up the recovery team for both Apollo 10 and Apollo 11.
Okay, when you got to the module, came down into the ocean there, and you got the raft up next to it, and what were your feelings at that point? Was there excitement? Was there just want to get these guys out of here? What was going on with you?
Well, working for NASA is a unique experience because they pay such meticulous attention to detail, and there's no option for failure on anything that they do. So we were drilled and drilled and drilled again and again and again, and during any particular phase in the evolution, the only thing you're concentrating is the next thing in your checklist that you're going to have to do. So at that point in time when we're ready for the decontamination, I'm making sure that the 2 bottles of decontaminant, one was betadine for decontaminating the astronaut, and the other was sodium hypochlorite for doing the flotation devices in the raft, and so I'm making sure that that's in the proper position, that I have this bag of biological isolation garments that are going to be passed in, and then when I'm satisfied that everything is in order, I give a thumbs up to the helicopter, and then they go back to the ship, and the ship goes to the astronauts and says they're ready for you to open the hatch to accept the isolation garments. So at that moment in time, that's what I was concerned about. Do that part right.
The emotion's taken out of it, and that's saved till later on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, when you got the astronauts out, you opened them up, was anything said? Was there any exchange of dialogue of any kind?
Well, yes, there was.
Welcome home or anything like that?
Well, you know, we were wearing these isolation garments, and if you've seen pictures of them, they have a gas mask, literally a gas mask on the front. It was designed to filter the air that the astronauts breathed out because we were trying to contain a possible lunar pathogen, and then my mask was filtering the air that I breathed in. And when you're in this mask, you can't talk, you know, it comes out. And so I'm wondering to myself, exactly what do I say to these glorious men that have been in harm's way for 10 days and are coming back here as heroes from the moon. From the moon. Yeah. And I really wasn't prepared for that. The first person out of the command module was Buzz Aldrin, and he stuck his hand out to shake it, and all I heard was yeah. And as a Navy-trained man, you repeat back your instructions, and so you know, I just went back into my own apparatus, and all those years I kept wondering, what was it that he said?
Did you ever find out?
Well, on the 25th anniversary, I asked him, and he said, how would I remember that 25 years ago? So all I can say is, whatever was said, it sounded something like,
That's right. That's an exact quote, too, right? Clancy, great seeing you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, Jack.
Yes, come back and see us. That's Comcast Local Edition aboard the USS Hornet. Thanks for watching. This is Comcast Local Edition. We're aboard the USS Hornet here in Alameda. It's a floating museum that you can visit, and you should, because lots of wonderful things are going on here all the time. Right now, this week, they're celebrating the 35th anniversary of the picking up the Apollo 11 astronauts. They get the astronauts out of their capsule, out of the water. Well, you had to have someone who could do it, frogmen. These guys, underwater demolition type people, were doing it. Clancy Hatleberg is with us right now. He was the first person, I guess you were the first person to meet the astronauts when they came out, right?
That's correct, Jack. I was.
Yeah.
It was an honor.
Yeah, and they came out and you were all wearing these suits.
Biological
Give us a little description of that.
It was actually it was pretty advanced at the time, a precursor to Gore-Tex, I think. You know, it was a semi-permeable membrane that allowed a certain degree of comfort. It was, of course, olive drab, and it had felt pads on the foot.
Not your favorite color.
Not you bet. And then it had this gas mask on the front to contain the breathing. So their gas mask filtered the air that they breathed out, because we were very concerned about a lunar pathogen, and mine filtered the air in unless I get contaminated.
We ought to mention that again for people who didn't realize that we were very afraid of moon, quote-unquote, germs coming back, and everything was isolated.
Absolutely. Just think of H.G. Wells' story, The War of the Worlds.
Right.
And you can imagine how concerned everybody in the program was that we don't end up introducing a lunar pathogen into the Earth's biosphere, and of course the disastrous consequences that could result from that. So they had an elaborate way of doing the decontamination to make sure that the lunar pathogen, if there was one, and it turned out there wasn't, would not escape into the Earth's atmosphere. The original plan was to have the Hornet come alongside and pick the command module up out of the water with its beam anchoring, and then they were going to run a plastic cocoon out. The astronauts would egress into the cocoon and then into the mobile quarantine facility that you can see right over here. But NASA's careful examination of that came to the conclusion that there were many sea states that would end up such that you couldn't always guarantee that you wouldn't damage the command module coming out. So they went to recovery at sea, and then they needed to have a swimmer out there to do the decontamination of the astronauts in their big suits, and also the flotation gear and everything else that was associated with the possibility of them touching or breathing on it.
Yeah, and of course you were the guy.
That's right.
You were the guy. What a job. What a high point of your life, I would imagine, at least your military life anyway.
Absolutely. It was a tremendous experience, most of which was drill, because of the NASA's meticulous attention to detail, lest anybody not be perfectly prepared for every contingency that might happen.
I have a question for you that someone asked me about a while ago. Did astronauts get seasick when they were inside that capsule? It was floating back and forth for quite a while.
We were so worried about that, because the night before the storm, the night before the recovery, we actually were in a tropical storm, and Admiral Sutherland had to make the decision in concert with NASA to move 200 miles, the splashdown 200 miles north. Even so, we were on the outskirts of the storm, and we had the highest sea states that we'd ever experienced in any practice, let alone the actual recovery. And so that was one of my great concerns: is what do I do here if the astronauts actually got sick?
Right, and they were in these suits.
Right, but the suits would have had a certain amount of containment value to them. Yeah. But nonetheless, as it turned out, even though they had been weightless for 10 days, they weathered the sea states in the raft and just fine. There was no problem whatsoever.
Well, the people who were able to do that, to survive, to get on top of that mountain of a rocket, go to the moon and come back, are extraordinary people. These are not normal human beings. They are 5 steps above. Wouldn't you think so? Don't you agree?
That would be my take on it, Jack. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and even your job itself, the kind of training that you required, that everyone required to do and to participate in these space programs, is above and beyond what most people would ever experience in their life.
Exactly. NASA had a grand blueprint of how to execute this plan, and everybody had their part, and we all practiced to make sure that we could execute. And that's the NASA way, and it worked flawlessly in this occasion, even though we were dealing with last-minute decontamination procedures that had been carefully thought out, and the highest sea states that any of us had ever experienced.
Great to have you here as a guest, Clancy.
It's been a pleasure, Jack.
Enjoy yourself this week. It's Comcast Local Edition. I'm Jack Hansen aboard the USS Hornet. Thanks for watching.